Hi, professional writers. This is your May 22nd video, Monday, May 22nd video, part 2, all about emails. All right, let's talk about emails and who your audience is for an email. Remember, your audience can be internal, as in the people within your company, or external to people outside of your company. You want to make sure you keep in mind your audience when writing, because different audiences get different styles of writing and different levels of formality. All right, remember always, always, always that email can have multiple viewers. Hillary is our example here. It is not private, and so be careful about what you send in an email. Don't ever send any really sensitive personal information, like, for example, account numbers or bank accounts or passwords or anything like that. Make sure to always keep it super professional and be overly courteous, since sometimes it's hard to read tone in emails. I'm as guilty of this as anyone. Sometimes I forget to make it super courteous. It's very, very important, especially when emailing people outside of your organization. Finally, make it super concise, and we've reviewed that in the last video. Now, the purpose of your email is going to be different from your audience. You always have to think about your purpose, because you want your purpose to be extremely visible. Remember to keep emails short. It should not be a long or complex message. If it needs to be a long or complex message, consider having a meeting instead. I know none of us need more meetings in our lives. Or you could do a memo. We'll talk about those later. So how do you know how long it should be? It should not take more than 2 visible screens, and so they should only have to hit scroll once. And if it's longer than that, make it an attachment, make it a report, make it a memo, or stop by and have a conversation. Make sure you do not have your caps lock on, okay? Make sure it's more formal when you're emailing someone who is unknown to you. When you're cold emailing someone, it's like a cold call. You want to make sure that everything is very professional and formal and respectful. Also, you need to keep it more formal when you're the one initiating the conversation, even if it's 2 people within your organization that you do know. Keep it more formal when you're the first one sending something, especially if you want something or if you want them to do something. It can be less formal to people you chat with on an everyday basis, like your colleagues, and it can be less formal when replying to someone else's email. Okay. In return emails, I'm not sure if you can see that. My recorder might be in the way, but you can be less formal in return emails. Okay. Here's some pitfalls to avoid when it comes to emails. Don't put really important stuff in emails, because we get a ton of emails, and a lot of times we're really desensitized to them. So with really important stuff, with time, sensitive material, make sure you send a more formal thing, or send an email as well as a letter, or do an email with a follow-up phone call. This is to avoid it being overlooked. Also, emails have no paper trail. They're easily deleted. And so if it's important for you to establish a paper trail to prove that you sent something to someone and that they received it, you might want to consider instead sending a memo or a letter. Also, some unions require hard copies, and this is usually a memo form. They require hard copies to be posted in break rooms and stuff, because not everyone has access to email all the time. I know it seems crazy in this day and age, but it's true. Some prisons, for example, don't let you have your cell phones, so you're not going to get an email during the day, and so maybe a break room memo would be a more effective way of communicating. Finally, again, I can't emphasize this enough. Don't put secure, sensitive information in emails, because they are not secure and they can be hacked, okay? And not only is Hillary a victim of this, but there's also plenty of other examples of companies who have suffered from their emails getting hacked. One is Sony, and basically their emails were hacked, and they were proven to pay women less and be really kind of racist in their movie choices. This can have serious consequences for chairmen and for CEOs. And so just avoid it, okay? So those are kind of the big picture ideas about emails, common best practices. Now we're getting to the more nitty-gritty parts of the email, what to include in the email that you're going to be writing. Okay? Always, always, always include a meaningful subject line. Don't have something really vague like hello. That's terrible. People are gonna think you have emailed them a virus or that you're a prince in Nigeria trying to scam them. All right. So you want a meaningful subject line. It should be more than one word. Usually no more than 3 words. Okay. So that's your idea. 2 to 3 words is a meaningful subject line. Make sure it has to do with the purpose of your email. You should always include a salutation, or as one of the readings call it, a proper greeting. So don't just launch into whatever you want or whatever you need or whatever you want someone to do. Instead, you should say something like, dear so-and-so, or hello, professor, or good morning or good evening. I try to avoid the good mornings and good evenings because you don't know when they're going to be receiving it. And so even if you write it in the morning, if they get it in the evening and you're saying good morning, it just doesn't hold up as well. So I would stick to hi, hello, dear. Those are all good standard forms. So make sure that you use standard correct spelling and punctuation. That moment when you see a typo in the email you sent to the whole company, don't let that be you. Okay? And that's part of the reason why we're going over grammar in this session. Make sure your paragraphs are clear and short. In an email and in most professional writing, you can have a 1-sentence paragraph. That's totally fine. In a term paper, you might want to have at least 3 sentences in a paragraph, but that's not true of emails or letters or professional writing, okay? Make sure each paragraph has its own point. It's short and clear and precise. Don't make jokes in emails. Just don't do it, okay? They never go over well because you can't show your face and you can't show you're laughing and you can't show that it's a joke, right? So just try to avoid the jokes in emails. When you're responding to someone else's email, you should make sure to trim back old copies, especially if it's a really long email. So if you're sending something back and forth and there's like 14 emails, trim those back. You don't need to keep them in there. And that will help the email be shorter. And, depending on how their email shows up, sometimes they get the newest stuff first, but sometimes they don't. And so trim back those old copies. Try to respond in a reasonable time frame. I usually think of this as within 24 hours, but really you should figure it out based on your company's culture and your workplace culture and how often people get back to you. Okay, at some universities, it's within a week. That's reasonable. Other times, it's within an hour. So really pay attention to how often people respond to you, within what time frame, and what's best practices at your company. After you've initiated the conversation, especially if it's a lot of like back and forth, you can leave out the salutation. Okay, so you don't have to say, dear director Halprin every time, okay? You start off with that, and then he responds, and then you can respond, and you don't need to say it again. Here are things not to send. So you can't see it, but the meme says, I sent you an email to let you know I sent an email. Don't do that. Here's some other stuff to not send. Personal stuff. Don't send, personal bank accounts. Don't send who you're crushing on at the moment. Stuff like that. Don't send usernames or passwords. You're just asking to be hacked, okay? Don't trash talk your coworkers or your organization. And this should probably go without saying, but we all need good reminders sometimes because it's sometimes hard to remember. Don't send trash talk over email because it will end up going to the wrong person. I promise you it will. Try to avoid sending attachments unless they're requested and expected, because often attachments can be viruses and people might be disinclined to open them unless they've specifically requested them. And so when you're emailing potential employers, don't attach your CV until after you've established a dialogue, unless they've requested it in the job call. Okay? Don't send huge files. Don't send viruses. Okay. When you're responding to multiple people or a listserv, try not to ever hit reply all, even though I'm guilty of doing this. It happens, but just try to double check it, especially when you're new. Don't send sensitive info. And if you're unsure of what's happening, or if you are a little irritated, don't send the email right away. And even if you're not irritated, try to sit on the email and see what the tone of the listserv is before emailing. Here's a couple other best practices. Make sure to read a whole conversation, because you don't want to ask a question that they've already answered, especially if they're your boss. Don't expect an immediate reply. Give people time. I would say at least 24 hours. And because there's nothing more irritating than getting an email saying, I emailed you, where's your response? So, don't expect immediate replies. Not everyone is attached to their phone constantly. Make sure you proofread it and review it before you send it. Don't email angry, because that will come across. It will come across that you are irritated at someone. So if you feel angry after getting an email, sit on it. And I would sit on it for 24 hours. Don't send a million emails, and check before forwarding. You want to check with the person who sent it that it's okay for you to forward it. Okay? Sometimes you might want to write a memo instead. We mentioned union purposes and people who don't have phone access at work, and for more important material like bank accounts or payroll or something. Okay? All right, so I'm going to finally end up by talking about email signatures. So you'll notice that most things, you start off an email and you need a to, and you need a from, you need a subject, and you need a date. So you'll be writing an email to Liz Horgan or someone in the Career Services Center advertising an open position at your company. So include all these things, and then you want your salutation. I would say something in your email about, I have an open position for this particular spot. You want to make sure it's clear. And then you want to say something about why you're hiring. And specifically from Nichols College. Why are you asking for Nichols applicants? What they should send you. And by when. Give a real date. Don't just say within 2 weeks. Give an actual due date. And then give some indication of what the job responsibilities are. Okay? This can be bullet pointed. All right, and then thank her or him for reading your email and for passing along your job call. And sign off. All right, so I would sign off just with your first name / what you like to be called. So maybe your full name is Joshua, but you really go by Josh. And so you can say Josh here. And then you need to include a signature line. Now the signature line should have your whole name, your position in the company, your phone, okay? At least that much, and you might also even include the logo. That might be to the left. Think of this as your business card. So you want to thank you, and you give your name, and then this bit is your business card. So you want all the important information you have there. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. Look at the sample emails in the folder, this resources folder, and have fun writing your email. All right, the end.